Okay. I'll do this. I present to you Dr. Daniels.
Okay, hello, good evening and welcome. I appreciate your being here. I know that you must all be balancing many different responsibilities and demands on your time. So I'm Dr. Emily Daniels. My PhD is from the University of Rochester. I got it in 2010, and it was definitely a mountain to climb for all kinds of reasons. And since then, I've been in different roles. I was an assistant professor. I'm also an adjunct. And then I started my own little business supporting graduate students. So a lot of that is around coaching and mentoring, but also editing. So I've seen a lot of different dissertations, and I've worked with people at all different phases in their journey. At the beginning, in the middle, at the end, where the tears come out, where the screaming happens, where the deadlines get tighter, where the frustration rises. So one of my goals, and one of the questions I'm going to ask you tonight, is to think about your own why. And one of my whys is that I felt that in my own dissertation journey, I did not receive good support. And I felt like there were some things that were missing in terms of mentoring, connecting, explaining, and digging into certain aspects of life as a PhD. So hence my new journey, outside of academia, but also on the edges of academia, helping people in their own journeys. So welcome, that's me. And I guess we can just get started then with the slides. And of course, I was informed that this could be sort of interactive. So if you have a question or a comment, you can just signal somehow and we can interact. So it doesn't only need to be me speaking. Okay, so just making the space there. So the topic, Taming the Dissertation Dragon, writing, rewriting, and editing. I love this image. I found it online. I felt it was so powerful. You have the eye contact, you have this terrifying monster, you have this woman who's standing there, sort of fearless, right? Facing that monster. So we're going to play with that metaphor as we move forward. So first I want to consider dragon identification. Again, thinking of this as a metaphor. What kinds of challenges or dragons are you facing? We're also going to look at writing as a process. It's cycles, different processes that come together, the ebb and flow of writing. And finally, we're also going to talk about strategies for taming the dragon and how we might approach that. Because depending on what kind of dragon it is, we have to think about different ways to come towards it. What sort of weapon or what sort of food or what sort of incentive would you like to use to tame this particular dragon? So first thing to consider. I'm going to move this down. Whoops. Sorry, going back. First thing to consider is, what kind of dragon are you facing? So this is a self-reflective piece. What's getting in your way? What is interrupting your progress? And where? Is it in the writing? Is it in the rewriting? Is it in the editing? Now, what do I mean by dragons? Again, such a fun metaphor, right? It might be within us. It might be something like our own self-doubt or insecurity. It might be our tendency to be a perfectionist, right? A lot of doctoral students have that perfectionist thread. It's kind of why we do what we do. We're challenging ourselves. We want to be good at this. We want to dedicate our all. But sometimes that can be a little restrictive when we always expect it to be perfect. That can be a dragon. What are our expectations? Expectations can be dragons. They might be skewed. For example, I will write a 30-page chapter in 2 days. Good luck. It's really, really unlikely. Could it happen? Sure. Will it be fantastic? Well, maybe you're amazing at it. Maybe it will. Probably not. So we might need to adjust our expectations. You might see that little dragon there, that little sort of, what is it, like purplish pinkish up there in the middle. Maybe that's our expectation. Maybe it's just a little tiny dragon, but maybe it's a really big one with 2 heads. Maybe that's what's getting in our way. Maybe it's time management. A lot of us are professionals. We're balancing family, we're balancing jobs, we're balancing volunteer opportunities, we're balancing other projects, all kinds of things. How are we managing the complexity of our time? Realistically, that could be a dragon. It might be negative self-talk. You know that inner critic, are you familiar with her? Have you heard of her? Yeah, I know she's in there, or he's in there, right? Oh, you can't do this. Why are you bothering? You're not really good at this. You're not a good writer, you know that, right? You'll never get to the end. That little voice, she is a dangerous dragon because she undercuts you. And she can stop you before you even start. It could be lack of resources. I know I mentioned in my little spiel at the beginning that I didn't feel all the way supported in my dissertation journey. And it was because my chair had a lot going on in her own personal life, which is fine, I understand that. But I also had to sort of find my own way. And that sometimes got in my way as well. It might be issues with your committee. There might be infighting, there might be power, there might be politics, there may be complexities with response times, right? It may be family. It may be life itself. For some reason, I don't know why this is, but it always seems like when people are getting their PhD, life pops up and gives you a lot more to do, a lot more to deal with. And I've heard this from so many students in different ways. You know, health issues, family stuff, relocation, divorce, marriage, you know, all kinds of things. So these are all the different forms of dragons. So what is getting in your way? What dragons are you facing? When you think about that, you don't need to be honest with me. You need to be honest with yourself. Right? What's getting in your way? What kind of dragon is it? Does anything come to mind? Does anything pop up when you think about this? Does any of this resonate? No? Maybe I have the wrong kind of dragons. But maybe there's something that you can identify when you do some honest reflection and think about, what are my challenges? What kind of dragon?
I would say everything, all the above.
Really interesting, Shelley. Okay. All of the above, just these, each of those dragons, like the entire horde?
Oh, you got it all. Yes, like, I stopped coursework and family life really became a priority because I kind of put it off for a while.
Yeah.
And then I feel my committee maybe a little disjointed, or maybe not knowing really what what's
Yeah.
expected of them.
Yeah.
My chair went on sabbatical for a year.
Yep.
I think time management, motivation. I put motivation in there too, because I think you just get exhausted after coursework.
Yeah.
And then to keep finding that drive to continue. Or maybe you have a really, like, you think you've got it all together, and then you talk to your committee and it's just not there, and then you're stuck. I got stuck for a while.
Yeah.
Until I could figure my way again, my path. Yeah, a little bit of everything sometimes.
Right. No, those are really good points. So it's targeting and seeing, okay, what are these things? What are these challenges? And I think you're right. Sometimes we even have to prioritize those and say, okay, this is the biggest one right now. This is the ugliest, scariest dragon, right? You know, and I'm gonna approach this one first and then see. And it may be the motivation, because as you say, that's so central. You know, the motivation is so central, the internal stuff as well, in dealing with the external, you know, and all those complexities. So thank you. Yeah. Anyone else recognize any of these dragons?
Laura said the mental exhaustion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a common theme, you know, and how do we, this is such a delicate balance. It's so difficult. How do we create space to have a little bit of pause and rest and keep going? You know, that's really hard.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think, like, I know that for me personally, I've been talking with coworkers who are really supportive and like pushing me on with it. And I'll tell them it's not me thinking I can't do the writing or that I can't do the project or that the page count's too big. Like, none of that is the problem. I'm just exhausted. I'm like tired. I want a break, but I can't take a break because
Yeah.
everything's got deadlines. And, so that, and then the holidays are here. And so I'm not working, but then the holidays are here. So all that time, you know, it's got to be balanced with family, with holiday, but then also everybody leave me alone because mama's got to get her chapter done, you know? So, you know what I'm saying? So I think, like, for me, my dragon right now at this process of almost to the finish line, but not like at the 50% mark of everything,
Yeah.
is just exhaustion. I'm just mentally tired of thinking about it, doing it, looking at it, caring about it. And it's not that I'm not going to finish it. It's just like I'm at this place of, I need like a break, like a really good, don't look at it break.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Laura. Thank you. Yeah, because it is exhausting. It's like a marathon. It's crazy. And there's just so many ways that it challenges us. So thank you. Yeah. Exhaustion. Any other things you recognize or notice in your own experience? Yeah.
I get the sneak attack dragons.
Say more.
Well, just like, you know, the family stuff happens like out of the blue. Like, you think you have your schedule of what's going to happen, and then you turn the corner and then there's a dragon. You know, or I will get lost down the rabbit hole of research.
Yes.
Because I don't know when I have enough of it.
Yep. Literature reviews. Literature reviews themselves are dragons. We can discuss that entirely, but yes, like, what is enough? That's a great question, you know. And what I tell people with that is I tend to say, what's being repeated? In other words, who are the central actors in your particular field? Who are the main voices? How often do you see them? And what are a few of the extensions? You can't include everything. You can't, because you'll drive yourself nuts. So it has to be bounded by your specific topic and specific subtopics. And you might ask for page length suggestions. I don't know if your university has them. I know some places say 50 max or 30 max or, you know, 70. I've seen a wide variety of clients with a wide range of page lengths, and I know that universities do that differently. But yeah, having some kind of boundedness on it can help, because you're right, it can just be forever. And I love that you used the term sneak attack. And what you made me think of was the discussion before we started of D&D, and it's almost like you're in a labyrinth, and all of a sudden you turn a corner and, you know, there's the dragon. You're just like, oh no, roll, get out my sword. Yeah, because it's unanticipated. You know, it's unanticipated. That's another complexity, right? Life itself throws things at us. Yeah. And it's a humbling process. It's a humbling process. Anything else? Any other dragons you notice? Okay, moving on. So when we think about writing itself, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. This is one model. It's from Kansas State University. What's helpful about models is they can break things into bite-sized pieces. Not dragon bite-sized, people bite-sized. So thinking about this, what's involved in the pre-writing? The generative part, where you're creating those ideas. Maybe you use giant sticky notes. Maybe you use Word documents. Maybe you talk with your friends. Maybe you bullet point things. But in that generative stage, you're creating the pathway to the writing. You may have to go back there. So it's an interesting process also, because even though it's written out sort of as a A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, it's not always, right? So researching, Faith Ann, you just mentioned researching, and then like, where do we go? Where do we stop? What do we find? And how do we know? Keeping it relevant to the topic is a big piece of advice, because you can always go off on tangents or down rabbit holes. So how do I keep it focused on the specific elements of my topic? I love subheadings. I'm a big fan of subheadings. So I would sometimes just create some and then change them and move them around to think about how does, if I'm looking at the topic of care, how does love fit in? How does critical care fit in? How does, these different elements, how do they fit under this larger umbrella? So again, those sort of bite-sized, like, how do I manage this in a way that doesn't make me crazy? If this is a particular dragon, if I'm having struggles around the outward or the inward, like expanding or contracting. So researching is part of the fun. And sometimes we have to put limits on it too. I would recommend peers. I don't know if you do that in your group, but some sort of peer feedback can be really helpful. A buddy, a colleague, somebody who helps hold us accountable, as well as someone who's willing to provide maybe a few pages worth of feedback. You give them 5 pages, they give you some feedback. Drafting is the part where you actually sit down and do stuff. And unfortunately, we often think of writing as only that, but it's not. We think, oh, it only counts if we're sitting here, inputting things on the keyboard. That's part of it, but it's not the only thing. After we draft, we have to revise. And this particular model suggests revising content before revising organization. Why? Because the content will shape your organization, right? The content is the meat. It's the stuff. It's the main elements. The organization is the flow, how it fits, bringing the puzzle pieces together. When my son was little, he liked the Thomas the Tank Engine trains, and they have to fit. And when they don't fit, the trains go elsewhere, right? Which is also fun. But the point is that organization, when we're writing, really needs to hold together so that we can make a good narrative, so that we can make a good little journey. Editing and proofreading, 2 different things. Sometimes people get these confused. So editing is the big picture stuff. The stuff like, okay, how is my voice? How are the transitions? How is the argument? Are the paragraphs? How do they all go together? How does the entire piece fit? That's editing. Now, proofreading are the minor things. They're like spelling, typos. Do you have your parentheses in the right place? How are your commas? Everybody messes up commas. Is et al. Written appropriately? Remember, et al. Means the period and then the comma, right? So no 2 periods, no 2 commas, just 1 period, 1 comma, right? So thinking about those dumb little things, that's proofreading. So if somebody says, I'll proofread your paper, that's what they're going to do. They're going to look at things like typos, spelling, verbs, that kind of stuff. That's proofreading. And then publishing, hitting submit, getting it out there, getting it off of your computer, getting it out to your faculty. There's a great quote by Isaac Asimov, also a science fiction writer, happily. And he said, don't just leave a manuscript to eat its head off in a drawer. What a beautiful quote, right? I mean, we don't have drawers so much anymore. Now we have computer files. But thinking about, is the manuscript going somewhere? It needs to go somewhere. It can't just sit. So sometimes thinking about the process in pieces can help us create goals or can help us recognize our progress. So it serves different purposes. It can also help us see that there's some movement and flow in writing, and that it's not, again, just sitting there typing things on your computer. Make sense? Comments, thoughts? There are lots of models out there. This is just one. And I know we have X amount of time, so, but there are many sources that talk about phases in writing, or how it's a process, or how it's circular or nonlinear. We're okay? We're all good. Bite-sized pieces. So again, I won't go through everything here because I know I wanted to give you stuff. So what I'm going to do is this presentation will be shared with you, but I found some really neat sites that I've used with different students and clients. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill has a great writing site. And on their site, they have so much good stuff, but they specifically have stuff on editing and proofreading. And they also have stuff on forming writers groups. They also have stuff on targeting your specific concerns, like argument or structure or voice, or if English is not your first language, like all kinds of resources. Really good site. Kent State has a good resource on how to revise. And the University of Melbourne also asks questions in sort of a thoughtful, dialogical way. How do I edit? What do I need to look at? What are the questions I need to consider when I'm editing? So I got a little picture here of a dragon life cycle. So we got a little egg, we got a baby dragon, we got a slightly larger dragon, a big dragon, okay. Actually chrysalis first. So it looks like maybe it's circular, maybe it's linear. It's a process. That's an interesting one because this seems like it might start from A to Z, but maybe it is circular. Because the big dragon makes the little baby dragon, right? So when we think about that with our writing, again, it may not be linear. It may be kind of more of a life cycle, more circular. The thing is about writing is that it works differently for everyone. And our relationship to it may be complicated. So there's tremendous power in brainstorming. I put COPs here, communities of practice. So your friends, your colleagues, your cohort mates, your writing group, whatever you have, your community will support you as you support them. So drawing on that and thinking about that deliberately as you move forward. Comments or thoughts? While I take a sip of water. That was a lot of me talking. How do you edit your work? It's tough, isn't it? It's tough to define. How do you edit your own work?
I mean, that usually means sending it to my committee and getting their feedback.
Ah, okay. So you the external editing. Okay. So how do you self-edit? How do you like look at a document again and say, ooh, maybe I need to change that? Or do you?
So I can look at it for so long and then I kind of run out of ideas
Yes.
about what to do. And
Yeah.
sometimes if I look at it too long, I end up moving things where they don't belong.
Right.
Out of pure, I must need to do some more editing. So I kind of learned over the process of writing my first couple chapters that when I hit that point where I think it's as good as it's going to get, I send it to the committee because rather than mix up what the batter that's already, all the ingredients.
Yeah. I love that metaphor as well. It is like a soup or a stew or a cookie dough or something, you know, it really is a combination of things. And you can, I know that Laura mentioned earlier, you can get sick of it and then you may not see things, right? So as you say, Deb, you know, there's done enough. And sometimes that's where you need to stop. I recommend peers or friends just because it's another set of eyes and that can present a different form of feedback, right, than your committee, just to have somebody else's sight on it. Because when we see our writing so many times, we do stop being able to see. It's almost like we miss things. You know, have you seen those things where people have taken out the word the in sentences, but your brain fills them in? That kind of stuff, you know, so we miss it because we've looked at it so many times. We didn't even realize that we wrote he instead of the, you know, because our brain has filled it in. And sometimes having somebody else take a peek at it can help. Yeah. What else? What other kind of editing strategies or approaches do people use? Read it aloud. Read it out loud. It can actually be really interesting to hear yourself or record yourself reading it. It's just a different technique, another way to see, quote unquote, your writing. Or have a friend read it. You know, read it to you or your kid, whatever. Just somebody like to get that sort of auditory element as well. That might be another way to approach editing and hearing the piece, seeing the piece differently. So once again, it takes a lot of work. It takes multiple goes and rounds. And sometimes we do have to step away. And that's really hard with deadlines. So another tip that I like to give people is it will take longer than you think. It just will. Like, so once you start out, you know how I mentioned dragons of expectations? Yeah. You sometimes have to play with that because it's going to take longer. So when we build that in, it might help us to reframe and address that dragon more effectively. Okay. So strategies. How do we do this? What do we do? Well, we can identify our challenges. We can plan our taming. And there's some additional suggestions as well. Taking some time to reflect. What are your dragons? Maybe journaling, maybe making some notes. Also reflecting on your own learning and writing, your processes. What's working well? Maybe you're an early morning writer. Maybe you're one of those 6 a.m. writers. I've heard of them. I am not that person, but I've heard that they exist. I actually, one of the women in my writers group, she gets up and she writes at 5 a.m., 5 to 6, like 3 days a week, which that's amazing. I couldn't do that. My brain is not functioning very well at that time of day, right? It's just not my style. So if I try to do that and imitate that, guess what? It's not going to work for me. My writing time is late morning. That's when I'm really good. 10 to noon. That is like the best time of day. Sometimes late at night, my brain gets a little more creative. So that could also be a good time. Doesn't always mean it's great, but it's open and creative. So the 11 to midnight is another shift that actually allows me some flow. So when is your time? You know, thinking about that. Is it Sunday afternoon? You know, while other folks are watching the football game? I don't know, maybe. You know, is it breakfast on Saturday? So thinking deliberately about that, plus leaving some wiggle room because as Faye Fan mentioned, things are going to pop up, right? So what's your plan A? What's your plan B? What's your plan C? You know, to tame those dragons. I mentioned friends or colleagues. They're incredibly helpful. And this is a service you can provide for one another, you know. You can share, you could do accountability meetings. You could do accountability Zooms. 20 minutes. And we're gonna sit here and we're gonna write for 20 minutes. That's it. Say, hi, how you doing? How was your day? Awesome. We're gonna write. Just for 20 minutes. We're gonna do that on Monday evenings. Or bi-weekly. You know, it's flexible. It's shifting. It doesn't have to be one way. It can be conversations, it can be feedback, it can just be meeting and helping each other out. So once you think about your challenges, you've identified your dragon, then planning some approaches deliberately, thinking about that. What nurtures and supports you amidst these challenges? Who in your network can act as a resource? And then once you look at some resources that are out there, which ones will be targeted specifically to your needs and your goals? You can consider professional support. It might be academic editors like me, it might be professors, again, it might be friends who are in your field. You know about SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. So again, setting goals that are deliberate, not, I'm going to have this done. Of course you're going to have it done. That's what you want to do. Yeah, that's excellent. That's great. But how do I make it in 2 weeks? I will have this. In 4 weeks, I'm going to have that. What works for you? It might be a timer. It might be page numbers. It might be just setting a regular writing practice. Or it might be the reflection on the things that are getting in the way. My suggestion is always to revisit your goals too. Don't make them super, super set in stone. I like hard copy calendars. I like actually writing stuff. I love ticking things off a list. When I have a list, it makes me happy when I can put a check mark next to something. It's really silly. It's a trick that I use with myself that works well. You know, do you have some little tricks like that? You know, some little approaches that help you to move forward with whatever challenges you have in your life? Because this is another challenge. Treats and tricks, rewards. Yay, I'm going to go out to dinner on Saturday because I did this. Or, you know, I'm going to go hang out with my friends and we're going to go to a movie. Or, I don't know, something, you know, I'm going to go for my walk after I do this. Or I'm going to go for my walk before I do this. Another technique or another strategy that can be kind of fun is to ask people who are close to you to write you a nice note. You know, and you take that nice note and you stick it on your wall behind your computer or on your mirror. Or, you know, it could just be something, send somebody a text, say, tell me 3 good things about myself, because I need that right now. Right? You know, and you take those 3 good things and you got to remind yourself. You got to remind yourself. Self-compassion. That's another component that we're often missing. That often doesn't come into the discussion, but having some understanding and kindness for yourself when you realize that you're fighting some dragons. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H, but she has a great website, little meditations, some free stuff, some really helpful books, just she's a Ph.D. and a Buddhist meditation teacher. So she's just got a lot of different insights in different ways, and I found her site really helpful. So, comments or thoughts here?
What's the name again of the?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me type it in the chat. Thank you for asking that. Tara Brach. And one of the books is called Radical Acceptance. I think that one, she has a new version, like the 20th anniversary, but she also has free meditations, like short little meditations, like 10 minutes, and just a lot of different stuff on compassion, kindness, life challenges, all kinds of things. So she's a great resource. I also really like, this one is just fun for quotes. But the Tiny Buddha website, because you can go and look at, like, I see you're nodding there, Shelley, you know, like persistence or courage, or whatever it is you think, you know, I need to click on some quotes about this today, right? And that's another good one, just for a little, again, pat on the back, a little motivation. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Other questions or comments? Winston Churchill. Gonna be tough to get that dragon up in the sky. So, yeah, we're gonna face challenges and there's things we're gonna miss. But honestly, in Taming Dragons, the persistence, like with a PhD, is really key. And it does take courage. It does take courage and persistence. And it also takes a community. I know that's not there. That's my own insert. But your community is what can help hold you during the really big challenges. And we sometimes have to think about, what do we mean by success? You know, finishing. Okay. Okay. Finishing doesn't mean perfection. Finishing means finishing. And let me just tell you, you don't want 50 participants. Let me just put that out there. I've seen people hurt themselves with, I'm going to do 200 interviews. No, you're not. Don't hurt yourself. Scale it back. You know, make it reasonable and doable, right? Because that's another way we can sometimes create additional challenges in our methodology. I have one poor client, oh my goodness, somebody thought it was a great idea that she did 30 interviews. That is not a great idea for a novice researcher. Yeah, 30 in 3 different countries. Yeah, I didn't even, like, my mouth, I tried not to go, who let you do that? Because you're a beginning researcher, you're a junior researcher, which means you're learning the processes. You're not getting tenure. You're beginning, right? Like, you're starting. So the goal is that you're learning how to do this, how to do a good interview, how to listen, how to think about your data, how to categorize, analyze, break it down, reflect on it. So don't hurt yourself. One of my mentors, when I was getting my doctorate, she said, look, you can have an N of 2, which is what I had. I had 2 participants. 2. I meant to have 3. The third one didn't work out, so I had 2. I did a lot with those 2 participants, but I had 2. Nobody died. So thinking again about, how do we frame this? How do we engage with it? And how do we get support while we're doing that in these different arenas? Again, friends, colleagues, online resources, professional editors, professors. There are others out there who've done this, who tamed these dragons. The courage to continue. More resources. Okay, we're not going to click on all of them, but there's some really good books on academic writing. Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation is great, by Sage. I really like the Successful Academic Writing book. It's more about writing in general, but it's incredibly useful, and it breaks down about how to deliberately read as well as how to write. And there's just so many good exercises and components in that. Other sites, of course, SMART goals, I know I mentioned those, self-compassion, and finding common errors. The Purdue OWL is generally good. Their APA sometimes has a few glitches, just heads up. But in general, like, they've got some really good suggestions and ideas and stuff on their site. So, yeah, there's another one called Destination Dissertation, another book. And again, it's about, how do we get there? You know, there are resources out there. You're not alone in taming dragons. You know, Other people have done this. You can do this. You've done hard things in your life. I'm sure you have. And it's kind of remembering that. Sometimes it's reminding ourselves of that. Mhm. Questions, comments? No? Okay. I love this quote. So what is the gift of this particular challenge? You may not have an answer right now. You may have an answer already, you may know. But what is it? Personally, I'm coming off of a terrible virus bacteria infection. I usually don't get this sick, but I've been sick for over 3 weeks. And it was incredibly humbling, incredibly challenging. I don't sit still. I don't like to rest. I like to do and move and go. In the last few weeks, I've been on the couch, sitting. So that's been my dragon recently. What was the gift? For me, I realized that I needed to rest, even if I didn't want to. I realized that I tend to overcommit, that I expect too much of myself all the time, in every arena. That was the gift. How do I take it now? As I'm getting better, my ears still have fluid in them. I can mostly hear. Last week, I couldn't hear. I was teaching my Zoom class, it was terrible. And I was upping the volume. I was telling my students, can you speak up? Because I can't really hear you. Like, please speak louder. I know, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. But that was humbling. That was incredibly humbling. And challenging. You know, but I need to take something from that. I need to take some learning from that in terms of how am I going about my life? What am I doing? When am I resting? You know? So what's the gift? What's the gift when you tame this particular dragon? Might be the new learning. It might be the PhD itself. Deb, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, I think moving to the next phase of what happens after a PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you envision that as?
For me personally, it means a career change.
Yes, excellent, good. Yeah, yeah. So the career change, the new beginnings, the new horizons, you know, yeah, it's powerful.
For me, it means opportunity. I keep thinking about what new opportunity do I now have access to.
Yes, excellent. So that opportunity expansion, you know, these openings of doors or pathways that maybe weren't open to us before, right? That's a tremendous gift. It shapes our lives, and not only our lives, but the lives of our family too. And that's another thing to consider is how does this kind of ripple out? How do these things spread and emerge within our own circle? You know? What else? What other gifts can we think of or see? You get to call yourself doctor. Yay! Doctor, you can use it to make reservations at restaurants like we do. Dr. Emily Daniels, party 3. No, it's just a silly little gift. But something larger, yeah, how does it impact my family? How does it impact other people, my students, right? I've been given the gift to work with so many students in so many different locations from so many backgrounds because of that challenge, because of that dragon. And that's been tremendous. It's been incredible. I always learn. I always learn from them as they learn from me, hopefully. But I always learn from them. Thank you. Do you have other questions or comments for me? That's just about it. That's my email address. That's my website.
This was great. Thank you so much for giving us some insight and hopefully inspiring us to get through that next chapter.
Yes, it is. It might be a sword, it might be a bow and arrow, it might be a leash, it might be a magic apple, depending on the dragon, right? But yeah, it's just that momentum, like taming that dragon. And how do we move forward? Yeah. Other questions or thoughts?
I appreciate the resources you offered to
Yeah, no worries.
carry this conversation beyond tonight and to, some of them I have actually either on my desk or I'm in contact, but it's just nice to be able to look at other.
Yes, there's so many out there, and this is a challenge, I think, of the internet, right? You can search, okay, strategies. And then 2 hours later, you're like, oh, what did I find? Did I find anything useful? So to have somebody else say, look, here's some good ones. UNC Chapel Hill, I cannot emphasize that one enough. It's just UNC Chapel Hill, like writing center, I think, but so many good things. And again, you want to target what's most helpful for you. So don't spend 2 hours looking at every single link. Really think about, what do I struggle with? Is it the motivation aspect or the argument or the introduction or the lit review? And look at that and then focus on that. We live in a very distracted world. So another silly little thing that I suggest to people is put your phone in another room. If you can. Just really put it in another room. Do not open the internet and start going on Pocket or whatever, which is my bad use of time. It's to find weird stories that I then read, and I should really be doing something else. So yeah, thinking about how we navigate it. Yeah. Other questions or comments? Hey Pam, you just shared something.
Well, I just shared your presentation, the slides, into the
excellent.
chat. This
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
we have easier access to all the live links that are in your presentation.
They're all there, and yeah, and of course, I could be a resource if people want us to reach out as well. So yeah, other comments, questions, thoughts?
So actually, just because you brought that up, because in our theory, in our heads, like, all right, we work with our committee and we work with our peers. When is the appropriate time to get a professional involved?
That totally varies for everybody, and that's the weird response, unfortunately. My recommendation is pre-committee. And the reason is, if somebody is an academic editor and you have to write an APA, for example, they'll catch your stuff. So your committee won't have to pay attention to that. In addition, they'll look at things like argument, organization structure, tone, and all of those kinds of things. So what a good editor should do is tighten, tidy, make suggestions, ask questions, give you lots of feedback, not write your paper for you, of course. But those things are out there, heads up. So if you go looking for editors, just so you know, there are sketchy people out there who say, yeah, it's fine, I'll write your paper. It's fine, I'll write your chapter. But yeah, a good editor should be supporting your own voice and writing, asking you questions. Oftentimes you want to leave them some time and then leave yourself some time. So for example, if you send a chapter to an editor, right? They're going to need it for a few days to a week, depending on the editor. Then you're going to need some time to incorporate those revisions. So it's just another piece of the timeline to think about. Unfortunately, people sometimes come and say, hey, I've got a 150-page document. Can you get it to me by tomorrow? I say, no. I have done tight turnarounds because everybody has deadlines, but my poor eyes, that's why I need new glasses. Yeah, it's best to have a little bit of flexibility with the time frame so that they can provide that support. Now, that's one approach. If you get committee feedback, however, there's a different way to approach that then. Some people want the editor at that point, and they want the editor to help them work through the committee feedback. So that's another strategy. Some people only come like when their proposal is ready, you know, and they say, okay, I've 1 through 3. I want to send it to my committee. Okay, great. So that's how that would work. But other people, they just say, oh, I only have chapter 1. Okay, then I'll look at chapter 1. You know, it really depends. Reference lists, citations, APA little dragons. Oh my goodness. There's all kinds of silly little things. I've never seen a perfect reference list. And yeah, it's just something, yeah. So I highly recommend having somebody look over your references at least, just as a suggestion, because those periods, commas, spaces, you know, font, you know, every dumb little detail, your hanging indents, what are your margins, what's bold, what's underlined, is it all the same, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's what an editor will help you with. So, what else? Other questions or comments?
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and insight tonight. This was really helpful and motivating.
I'm glad, yeah, it's doable. It is doable. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, it is. But it's doable. And it's, you know, again, choosing your weapon and thinking about your strategies and being deliberate and noticing patterns. So that's another thing. We think about like what gets in the way. It might be the same pattern. It might be the same kid. It might be the same phone call. It might be the same professor. Like it might be. And then when you notice that, then how do I work with that or around it? You know, like, okay, so this is going to be the time when we can talk. I've had to tell my mom, do not text me between 10 and 12. And she continues to do so. So that's the other reason why I leave my phone downstairs. I love my mom. I love talking with her. But, you know, 10 and 12 is my writing time. So I need to put my phone away. So you're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it. And I hope this has helped. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have questions or want to dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels.
Yes, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Take care.
Bye.